All right, so a couple of days ago, we had the first official debate between Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, his GOP opponent for the Senate seat down here in the state of Georgia. And so I wanted to run through a couple of these different clips here with you guys because Herschel Walker, predictably, as he always does whenever he is in a public setting in front of a camera, said some absolutely wild shit. And in terms of how well Raphael Warnock did, I honestly kind of think that it was like a wash. I don't think that he was aggressive enough in some of the instances and opportunities that he had that we're going to watch through here. And honestly, I think at the end of the day, this debate really isn't going to matter that much in terms of the outcome of the election. But nonetheless, we did get some pretty entertaining ideas and clips from this. So this first one is about the minimum wage, and Herschel Walker is going to give us his take on what he thinks the minimum wage should be.
Do this by a simple showing of hands. Raise your hand if you support a federal minimum wage. Okay, Mr. Walker, you did not raise your hand, so I'd like to ask you, first of all, why not, and what would you do to help struggling Georgians?
Well, when you say a federal, I think right now, and he said that I want the federal government. No, he wants the federal government to run your life. Right now, I think you have to work with different corporations and see just where they can pay. There are some companies right now, and he should know this, after getting the All-Star game moved out of Atlanta, they destroyed a lot of small businesses. So those small businesses couldn't pay $15, $20 an hour. So they have to pay what they're capable of paying. So to mandate a federal fee that they have to pay hourly wage, no, I couldn't approve that.
Okay, so honestly, at the beginning of this clip, I'm not really sure why Raphael Warnock didn't raise his hand for this. I do know that he was somebody who was in favor of raising the minimum wage to like $15 an hour at minimum, so not exactly sure what that initial part of this, maybe I missed some pre-context for that, but in terms of what Herschel Walker just said, obviously he threw in a bunch of like mumbling about like something about the All-Star game being moved from Atlanta and how that affected some businesses' ability to pay wages or something. I don't know what the fuck he was talking about specifically in regards to that, but just at a fundamental level, okay? The idea that corporations should be able to pay less than the current federal minimum wage, and by the way, specifically here in the state of Georgia, our state minimum wage is actually one of the lowest, if not the single lowest, in the entire country. Now, thankfully, federal law, because of the supremacy clause, trumps state law, and so companies here in the state of Georgia do have to pay the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. But I mean, the idea that you are going to eliminate that, and then what? You're going to have corporations just pay whatever they can, and in reality what that really would mean is letting corporations pay whatever they can fucking get away with within the labor market, depending on how desperate people are for jobs, and basically just allow them to pay well beyond what would already be considered starvation wages. I mean, if you look at the current situation that we already have with our pathetic $7.25 an hour minimum wage across the country, if you look at the data, there is not a single county in the entire United States where somebody who is making $7.25 an hour minimum wage can afford a two-bedroom rental for themselves and their family to live in, right? So it's a starvation wage, meaning that you can't even afford, and I think there's only like 2 or 3 counties in the entire fucking country where you can support even just a one-bedroom rental for yourself on $7.25 an hour without cutting into some of your other basic necessities like food or your electricity bills or your other utilities and things like that. So, I mean, already the federal minimum wage is fucking pathetic. I mean, $7.25 is a joke. And if you look back at the historical trends and stuff, if the minimum wage had kept pace since like roughly the 1980s under the Ronald Reagan administration, if it had just kept pace with productivity and inflation, the federal minimum wage right now would be like $25 an hour. So even like the $15 an hour, which already wasn't able to get done because Biden didn't really fight for it. You had Kirsten Sinema with her cutesy thumbs down. Even that $15 minimum wage, that's a compromise position. Okay, the real minimum wage should be closer to like $20, $25, if not up, getting closer to $30 an hour, especially with recent inflation, in order for it to actually be like reasonable and give people some semblance of stability and ability to just provide the basic necessities for their life and to take care of a family. So that's what the wage would be if it was a living wage. But Herschel Walker is saying, not only do I not support raising the federal minimum wage, I don't even support any minimum wage from the federal government whatsoever. Just let companies do whatever the fuck they want. So, I mean, that's his take on that. Just like some of the most unpopular and wild fucking positions that you could take, but he's just openly saying this. And again, I mean, you look at the polling data on this, which we're going to get to at the end of this video. I mean, this race is still up in the air. I mean, it's virtually like a coin toss, and you have one of the candidates who is going out there and saying he wants to abolish the federal minimum wage in its entirety. I mean, what the fuck are we even discussing here? But now we get into this second clip. So this one is specifically on prescription drug pricing and how Raphael Warnock, I guess, helped to facilitate the passing of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was, of course, largely spearheaded by the corrupt fossil fuel millionaire coal baron from West Virginia, Joe Manchin. So he's going to give his thoughts on whether or not we should lower prescription drugs. Surprise, surprise, he has an absolutely horrible take. So let's go ahead and jump into this one.
Uncaps the cost of insulin. He said he would not have voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, and I think he should tell the people of Georgia why he thinks they should have expensive insulin and why the pharmaceutical companies should be able to charge us whatever they like.
Well, first of all, may I respond? I believe in reducing insulin, but at the same time, you got to eat right, because he may not know, and I know many people that's on insulin, and unless you have eating right, insulin is doing you no good. So you have to get food prices down, and you got to get gas down so they can go get insulin. And you continue to pat yourself on the back, but right now, families are starving. Right now, families are hurting, and they're hurting because of the bills and the laws you're passing right now.
Okay, so there's just so much to say about that. I mean, first of all, if I was going to give him even like a single modicum of credit or, agree with one of his positions here, which he really doesn't deserve. But yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're somebody with diabetes, it's a combination of medicines that you have to take. It's a combination with your lifestyle and exercise and the types of food that you're eating and all of that. Sure, to some extent, but that's not what the fucking discussion was about. The discussion was about whether or not we should have the federal government step in and allow Medicare to negotiate for a lot of these prescription drugs, one of which being insulin, which is basically just a situation where these gigantic pharmaceutical companies who either have an oligopoly or a monopoly control over the production and distribution of these drugs, they can just artificially jack up their prices to whatever the fuck they want. And that's exactly what they have been doing. And so now we have a situation where either a majority or a outright plurality of Americans are having to ration their insulin because they can't afford to keep up with the price gouging of big pharma. So that's the question that's on the table, right? Should we have the federal government step in to the private market, which is currently an absolute unmitigated disaster for average working class people in terms of getting their prescription drugs, whether it's insulin or any other drug for that matter? Should we have the federal government basically in some form or another have price caps or produce generic drugs or, use margin rights to, get rid of some of the patent protections that some of these monopolies have or, negotiate drugs with these prescription drug companies in order to lower those prices? That's what the question is about, but he just responds by saying, I guess, no, we shouldn't lower prescription drug costs because people with diabetes should just eat better and just, we should deploy other policies to lower the cost of gas so that we can get them to go pick up their insulin in an easier capacity, as if like that's what they were actually talking about. And then there's also an underlying point there, which is his attack against some of the bills that have been passed under Joe Biden, which Raphael Warnock pretty much supported the entirety of all of those bills. And honestly, he hasn't been aggressive enough, in my opinion, in terms of fighting to expand those bills and make sure that certain provisions aren't weakened by other corporate Democrats. But I mean, he's talking about bills as if that's the reason why we have high gas prices, right? The Inflation Reduction Act or, some of the other bills that have been passed recently, the CHIPS Act or any number of recent ones that have been passed under Joe Biden, as if that's why we have higher gas prices or that's why we have higher food prices. That has nothing to fucking do with the inflationary pressures that we are seeing in those key industries. You go and look at especially the oil industry, but this applies to a lot of these food corporations as well that have, again, oligopolies or near monopoly control over the production and distribution of some of these foods. They are making record profits, okay? Especially the oil and gas companies, BP, Chevron, Exxon, all of these companies have been making record profits over this inflationary period. And so, again, there's something wrong with that equation there, because if it was simply, an increase in demand because people have too much money in their pockets or because the federal government, there's a surplus of currency because the federal government spent too much within the economy and it got overheated, if that was the problem here, then you wouldn't be seeing excess profits from these companies, right? They would be seeing either decreases in their profits or they would be seeing flatlining, right? But they're seeing record profits while we're seeing record inflation. And so the answer to why we're seeing such inflationary pressure in a lot of these industries that he's talking about is because we have this private market where a handful of corporations can just choose to prioritize their shareholders, their executives, their own wealth, their own profits over the American people. This would be an argument for nationalizing our oil industry. This would be an argument for nationalizing our pharmaceutical industry, or nationalizing even some of our agricultural industry as well, and making it so that it is oriented towards, in terms of pricing and production, is oriented towards what is best for the American people instead of what is best for the shareholders on Wall Street. Okay, that would be an actual solution. Shoring up our supply chains, bringing back domestic manufacturing to this country. But he doesn't want to do any of that, right? He didn't support the even some of the pathetic manufacturing bills that we have managed to get passed through Congress. He just wants nothing. He just wants, I don't even know what his solution would be to address inflation. Just have austerity pushed on average working class people, cut government programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and pull money out of the pockets of working class people as if that is going to solve inflation. No, your proposals are going to make inflation, whether it's on food or gas or any of these industries, actively worse. Okay, so he has no fucking idea what he's talking about in regards to any of this, whether it's insulin pricing, pharma pricing, or gas pricing, or any of this in terms of addressing inflation. He's just throwing talking points straight out of his goddamn ass here. But now we get to this next clip, and this is going to be, I guess, somewhat of a long video now because I'm going on all of these rants, but this one was specifically about healthcare. And this is probably going to be a pretty short one because this is a pretty succinct answer and response to Herschel Walker's comments here. So let's go ahead and watch through this clip real quick.
Because if you have an able-bodied job, you're going to have health care. But everyone else have health care is the type of health care you're going to get. And I think that is the problem. And what Senator Warnock wants you to do is depend on the government. What I want you to do is get off the government health care and get on the health care he's got to get you a better health care. So that's what I'm trying to do, to make you independent rather than dependent.
Okay, so number one, as pointed out here by the recount, Senator Raphael Warnock, like all U.S. senators, has government-provided health care. Okay, so number one, if you're talking about getting off of the public healthcare system or getting off public health insurance and getting onto what Raphael Warnock has, he has government health insurance, right? And they have some absolutely phenomenal plans, way better than what most average Americans get in this country. And so, I mean, there's a point on that in terms of just the fact that he's straight up wrong at face value on his initial claim. But the underlying premise of, again, what he's saying here is that government-run programs inherently, whether it's on healthcare, pharmaceuticals, whether it's any of these programs that have been passed recently or, even historically, that they are inherently a problem and that it's inherently a better thing in order to get people onto the private market. Well, I mean, look at his claims there, right? Number one, he claims that everybody who is able-bodied and has a job has healthcare. Well, number one, that's not even true. You are not guaranteed healthcare through your employer, especially if you're somebody who's like an independent contractor or somebody working in the dramatically expanding gig economy. You have no guaranteed healthcare whatsoever. But even if you do have a job that provides some sort of a healthcare plan, they're often just shit healthcare plans, right? They're healthcare plans where you have massive out-of-pocket expenses, where a lot of things just aren't covered by the health insurance plan that you have. They're shitty healthcare. I mean, this is why we have like tens of millions of Americans, if not like close to 100 million Americans in this country right now, that are either uninsured or underinsured, okay? Meaning they do not have reliable access and affordable access to be able to get the healthcare and the prescription drugs that they need. So the private market in healthcare, having a for-profit motive at all within a system like a healthcare industry, that is inherently a problem, right? Because you have these essentially like mafia-style middlemen, as Kyle Kalinske likes to call them, mafia-like middlemen who are basically just standing in between you and the healthcare and extracting profits to the tunes of tens of billions of dollars off of your backs, right? They are preventing you from getting the healthcare that you need, all right? It's an absolute fucking disaster. We have 500,000 medical bankruptcies a year. Between 40 to 60,000 people die every single year because they don't have reliable access to healthcare. There were studies that came out just during the pandemic that said if we had Medicare for All implemented, in other words, a government-run health insurance plan, if we had had Medicare for All implemented, we could have saved like 400,000 lives from just the pandemic alone. So the idea that like the private market is inherently better at delivering healthcare that is affordable, that is accessible to people, it's completely fucking delusional. And again, he doesn't really even seem to understand at a baseline level what type of healthcare that U.S. senators get, which is the job that he's obviously trying to apply for here. But now we're going to move on to this one. So this one was specifically around abortion, obviously something that is contentious with some of the recent stories that we've been covering with Senator Herschel Walker in regards to this and his own hypocrisy on the abortion issue. So let's go ahead and jump into this clip.
I want to save your life.
Well, what's funny, man, I have to respond to this.
Very quick.
Because he told me Black Lives Matter. And if you think about it, Senator, in Atlanta, Georgia, there's more black baby that is aborted than anything. So if Black Lives Matter, why are you not protecting those babies? And instead of aborting those babies, why are you not baptizing those babies?
Mr. Warnock, or Senator Warnock, will give you a chance to respond to that.
I think the women of Georgia have a clear choice. He says no exceptions, even in the case of rape, incest, or the life of the mother. I think that's extreme, it's out of touch with Georgia, and I intend to do the work that senators can do.
See, he didn't
Mr.
read
Walker,
the heartbeat bill, though. Wait, he didn't read the heartbeat bill. That there is exceptions for that in the heartbeat bill. So when he makes a statement that is
Mr. Walker,
untrue,
that we need
and
to
I
move
do
on,
respect
okay? We've
that,
got
but
a
Senator, you have
lot
to
to get
read
in
that
tonight.
bill.
A follow-
Okay, so there's a number of different things to say about that. Number one, I think it's interesting that you have somebody like Raphael Warnock, who was a literal reverend, okay, somebody who was like a religious authority figure within the Catholic faith or within the Christian religion, right? And he was an actual reverend, right? So he has like this religious sort of like credibility. And you simultaneously have people like Herschel Walker and other Republicans who support Herschel Walker who are using like religious justifications for their abortion bans, right? So it's kind of like this ironic situation where the guy who's actually a religious authority figure, okay, in this Senate race is going up against a guy like Herschel Walker who's pretending like he is the embodiment of what God would have wanted in relation to the issue of abortion, right? So on that front, I think that that's pretty like ironic and interesting that there's sort of that like religious battle going on, and you have so many Republicans trying to claim that like Herschel Walker is a more godly figure against somebody who is a literal reverend. So I think that part is interesting. But in terms of the actual question here, which is on the abortion front, so obviously Herschel Walker, who does not support, as they said in that clip, exceptions for rape or incest or the health of the mother, which I've talked about on this channel before, those are basically meaningless in practice, especially in the form that Herschel Walker was just proposing there with a 6-week abortion ban or the heartbeat bills that they have been putting forward. So not only is he like hypocritical in the sense that we got that story coming out about Herschel Walker paying for one of his the mothers of his children getting an abortion. We got that story coming out exposing the fact that, you know, he believes in exceptions only when it's an exception for himself and his personal situation and being able to have that freedom of choice. So he's obviously a hypocrite on this. But then again, at a fundamental level, right? Disregarding the question about exceptions for the health of the life of the mother or the cases of rape or incest, he's talking about a heartbeat bill, right? So Herschel Walker is taking a position that is supported by like a tiny fraction of the American people. This is an incredibly unpopular position, I think, even within the state of Georgia, okay? And so what he's talking about with that heartbeat bill, I just want to make this clear, okay? A heartbeat bill is, first of all, not talking about a heartbeat. It's misleading language that Republicans use to defend it intentionally. It is not a heartbeat by a medical standard, okay? What they're talking about is when you go and you do like an ultrasound or whatever to look at the condition of the fetus at the time. It's not even like or an embryo at the time, because it's not even a fully formed fetus. It's considered an embryo at the time. And you do this ultrasound, and then the machine makes an artificial representation that sounds like a heartbeat but isn't a heartbeat, that's detecting some of the initial electrical impulses from what will later potentially develop into a heart. So first of all, calling it a heartbeat bill is inherently anti-science, anti-medicine, incredibly misleading. But on top of that, you're talking about a 6-week abortion ban, okay? 6 weeks is like before most parents or most mothers even know that they're pregnant in the first place. So the idea that you have some sort of credibility here to say, oh no, I actually do believe in these exceptions for rape or incest or life of the mother, but it's within a 6-week period, well, that's completely fucking meaningless, because nobody is going to be able to detect that they have a pregnancy, then either prove that they have been raped or been a victim of incest, or prove that they have some sort of medical anomaly within that 6-week period, let alone maybe even find out that you're pregnant within that period. So it's just a completely fucking insane, extreme abortion ban that Herschel Walker is in favor of here. So I think that that's something that's good for Raphael Warnock to be leaning more into. I don't think it's the only thing that he should be running on, but that's definitely a notable thing that is going to be an important factor in this race. Now, we did have an update here just to show you guys how terrible of a liar Herschel Walker is in regards to this allegation of him being hypocritical and paying for this abortion. So this is what he said. I'm not actually going to play the clip here, but hear from Aaron Rupar. So he sat down and did a recent interview to deny the allegations that were coming out from one of his own parents' child, or his own parents' mother, who he had a relationship with and who previously he paid her to have an abortion, basically. And so we got an update here in terms of what he's claiming. He says Herschel Walker's new denial is that the money he sent didn't actually pay pay for an abortion because the recipient is the mother of his other child, and he just sent her money for mom stuff. And the only problem is that the child in question was born years after the abortion. Okay, so this is how bad of a fucking liar Herschel Walker is. All right, he's claiming that the money he sent, which was pretty clearly and transparently for the abortion procedure, he's claiming that money was actually to support childcare costs for that mother. But again, the problem, as you just pointed out there, is that the child who you're claiming you were sending childcare costs to this mother for hadn't been born yet and wouldn't have been born until years later. So your entire statement here just fucking falls apart as you're trying to claim that it's the media that's lying, that all these other people are doing these hit pieces, these attack pieces against you. He's not even good at lying. Okay, so that was an update that we had that I thought I had to show you guys because it was just ridiculous. And now we get to the best part of this debate, where Herschel Walker basically just straight up impersonated being a police officer live on the debate stage and got hassled by the debate moderator here. So let's go ahead and watch this absolutely amazing clip here.
Accountable. One thing I have not done, I've never pretended to be a police officer, and I've never threatened a shootout with the police.
Well, and now I have to respond to that.
We are moving on,
I have
gentlemen.
to respond to that. And you know what's so funny? I am work with many police officers, and at the same time,
Mr. Walker, Mr. Walker, Mr. Walker, Mr. Walker, excuse me, Mr. Walker, please, out of respect, I need to let you know, Mr. Walker, you are very well aware of the rules tonight.
Yes.
And you have a prop.
Yes.
That is not allowed, sir.
Yes.
I ask you to put that prop away.
Well, it's not a prop. This is real. And he said, I have a problem. I never worked with law enforcement.
It is considered a prop, Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
You're very well aware of the rules, aren't you?
Well,
Aren't you aware of the rules?
brought up the truth. Let's talk about the truth.
Thank you for putting that prop away. And as a matter of fact, we still have a lot to get to.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, apparently I've tried to do some background research on this. I've tried to look into what his actual claim is here. So that badge was actually given to him by some police officer in some county here in the state of Georgia, right? But this is a badge that is like the equivalent of a participation trophy, or even less than that, right? It's a prop. It's a toy. It is something they give to people as a gesture, okay? It doesn't have any authority with it. It doesn't have any power attached to it. It's literally just a toy that they give out to some people in like a ceremonial context, okay? And so Herschel Walker is getting up here and he's sort of like mixing his words and his claims and the various times that he's talked about him being a police officer. Sometimes he's outright claimed, I'm a police officer. Sometimes he said he's an FBI agent. And sometimes he sort of like mixed it together and said, no, I just worked with police officers on like some specific community programs or something like that. And he's sort of like mixing these things together. But I genuinely believe that he thinks that those are the same thing, that like doing a training program with police officers or doing some sort of like a community reach out with the police is equivalent to being given some sort of authority from the police in the form of this like toy badge that he brings out. And then he has the audacity to bring this out in the debate while Senator Raphael Warnock is accusing him of impersonating a police officer and then turning around and saying, well, that's not true. I actually am a police officer. See, I have this badge. So like you're being accused of impersonating the police while simultaneously live in the middle of a debate while you're being heckled by the debate moderator impersonating a police officer. I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. I mean, it's just like the most ridiculous candidacy that I've seen in a long fucking time. And yet, even with all of this, even with all of their positions laid out there, this race is, again, essentially a coin toss. I mean, it says here, Warnock is up by like 3.9, 4%. Depending on the day, we're getting closer and closer to it. But, I mean, you look at the polling discrepancies usually in these elections, a 4-point lead for a Democrat, especially in a typically conservative state like Georgia, that is basically just a wash. It's a coin flip. It's meaningless. You shouldn't be comfortable in the fact that he has a 4-point lead. So this is something that could legitimately go either way. Even with all of these stories, when, you know, not even just to mention his very limited policy positions that we've gotten, right? Extreme on abortion bans, wants to abolish the federal minimum wage, doesn't really believe in addressing climate change. So many different individual positions that we could talk about. But just beyond that, him as a human being, okay, somebody who is a massive hypocrite on the issue of abortion, right? Wants these extreme abortion bans, but then went and paid for one of his future mothers to get an abortion, right? You have somebody who has openly threatened his own wife and pointed a gun at her head. Somebody who said that he was about to shoot somebody else in the head head during a traffic altercation, and then he saw a Jesus loves you bumper sticker and decided not to kill the guy. I mean, like, so many different examples of these crazy fucking stories demonstrating that he is unstable, unreliable, doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about in terms of policy, somebody who just has some sort of a credibility within the state of Georgia because he was a Georgia Bulldog running back, one of the greatest of all times, and he just used that and thinks, I'm going to become the next senator of Georgia, as if he has any credentials, any beliefs, any ideological framework, any policies at all that would justify him being in this position. So, I mean, this is really going to be a race where, I may or may not completely lose faith in the entirety of our political apparatus if I haven't already done that. To a large extent, I'd say I'm like 95% of the way there. But if somebody like Herschel Walker can win against somebody like Raphael Warnock, even in a state like Georgia, where, Raphael Warnock, I disagree with him on some things. I don't think he's aggressive enough or progressive enough. With all of those disagreements aside, this race should not be fucking close. But the fact that it's close, I think, says a lot about where we are right now as a completely fucked up country.
Everyone is saying good politics guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying